If you're a naughty child, you do not deserve to be abused. You deserve to be disciplined, because the adults are supposed to be there to guide us as children. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, which is all about mental health awareness and wellness. Thank you so much for your support. If you haven't subscribed and you're watching this, please go and do so just now. Today I want us to talk about trauma, as you can tell from the title of the video, and the reason is because you always see people say, oh, you should heal your childhood traumas, or you should deal with your traumas so that you don't bleed on people who never cut you and things like that. But usually, what are they trying to talk about? And when we talk about this, I would want us to mostly focus on something we call adverse childhood experiences, which are usually traumatic experiences for children, depending on where they are. Most of the time when we talk about trauma, we just think about abuse, we think about maybe sexual violence, but it's not just that. It's usually things like emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse. There's things like even being brought up by a parent who was incarcerated. There's also growing up with a parent who had an addiction problem, and all of these usually affect a child and the way we grow up, and these are things that we actually carry along with us and we are not even aware. So it's very important to work on them, so that as you are going through life, these things do not maybe control your life without you knowing. So the first thing, of course, is always to be aware. So for example, for me, I would tell you that I have shared before that I have abandonment issues, where I was abandoned when I was 5 years old, and I liked to avoid whatever happened. I didn't want to talk about it. That happened until I think when I was in university, and when I came to realize it was around 2020, we went to this seminar and we were taught about our traumas, and we were asked, remember by the age of 5 what had happened to you? And I was like, oh, I was abandoned. And then they go on and telling you and explaining to you how this affects you. And I came to realize, because of that, I have this tendency of thinking everybody who is going to come into my life is going to leave, or maybe I tend to be there for people because I was forced to be there for people, and also being a firstborn, I mean, you have to be the deputy parent. So I didn't know how that affected me until later on, when I came to realize, even in the pattern of the relationships I was having, I was always the one who is there. I was always the one wearing the pants in the relationship. I've always been a masculine kind of person, always wanting to have my way, always wanting to win, and not really embracing my feminine side. And until I learned that, imagine, that's when I got to work on it. So the reason I'm saying this is because we have to be aware of how these experiences actually come and affect us later on. Now, there is something we usually call trauma response, and this is how we react after a traumatic event. Case in point, let's use my example, which is abandonment. So my mom left us. As a child, how do you interpret that? How do you respond to that? And the best way I knew how was to take over the role of being a parent. And you see, that is a form of trauma response. So usually when we talk about trauma responses, there are usually 4. So many of us usually know about the flight or fight mode, but also there is the freeze and fawn responses. So when we talk about the fight mode, is usually where you find that someone is overly defensive, they always want to fight, they're very aggressive, they do not back up from a fight. And you see, this can translate in terms of your relationships, in terms of your workplace. The other one is now the flight, and this is usually mine. So you always run away from your problems. Maybe you want things to work out in a certain way, they don't, you run away from them. You find a relationship that could potentially become something, you run away from it, and maybe I see that someone is going to leave me or a relationship is not going well, and I'll be the one to break up with that person. So always running away from your problem. This can also come in terms of addictions, using substances to numb our pain, being too comfortable in our zones because we don't want a challenge. The third one is now the freeze response, where somebody doesn't know how to react, they just freeze. And you see, with that, then you find that there are people who actually do not know how to handle problems. They will not run away, no, but they will also not fight, no, they will just be there. So this is where you find that most people get stuck. You find they are stuck, or they become so depressed because they are just thinking about their problems and wallowing. And you know the quote we say, poor me, pour me another drink, because it's like you will just be there complaining over and over about the problem and not knowing what to do about it. And the last one is the phone. Now the phone is the people who do not have boundaries. So you find that, let's say you were abused when you were a child, so the phone, what they do is they try to make this person happy, the abuser happy. Or maybe it's a parent, you want to take care of them. Oh dad, can I do this for you? Oh mom, do you want some food? Oh mom, nini, you just want to make them happy so that they don't end up abusing you. So let's say someone who is verbally abusive, or they overreact, so you kind of walk in eggshells and you find yourself trying to please them. Yes, this is for people pleasers. You try to please people so that they don't overreact, so that they don't abuse you. And you see how this now can affect you even in terms of relationships, in terms of workplaces. You can't stand up for yourself because you're like, how will they react? Maybe they'll be angry at me and then I'll lose my job. And this is why we say you have to work on your traumas. You have to work on them. You have to be aware, first of all, that this happened to you. And when you're a child, you do not deserve any of this. Not at all. Even if you're a bad child or you're a naughty child, you do not deserve to be abused. You deserve to be disciplined, because the adults are supposed to be there to guide us as children. So it is okay to know that this was wrong, this happened to me, and now what can I be able to do about it? And that is where now things like therapy come in, where you get to process all these things and also in turn see how they affect your life as at now. When I learned about this trauma, and I learned that I used to attract maybe people who I thought they were going to leave, so this is what I used to do, because I know people always leave. Then I choose someone who will actually leave, or I will leave them, so that I can proclaim my self-fulfilling prophecy of, you see, people actually leave. So when I learned this, the first thing was to stop doing it, but then somehow you come and realize that you're doing it subconsciously. So it's time for you to now start learning when you're doing it, so that you stop doing that. Okay, so the next thing is now starting to attract or do the opposite of what you are used to doing, the healthier ways of coping, the healthier ways of living. If you're struggling with people pleasing, having boundaries. If you struggle with fight or flight, if it's fight, you start being more assertive instead of aggressive. If you're more passive, you don't want problems. I don't want problems. If you're someone who is like that, then you start being assertive and standing up for yourself. These are the things that you do to now work on your traumas, because if you don't work on them, you will keep on being that child that was abused, and you will not figure out why, because we do this subconsciously. It's not something that we intentionally do, but when you start being intentional about your life, I mean, you get to learn these things, and this is how you work on your traumas, why and where all these traumas are coming from. I hope that you have learned something. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you know someone who is dealing with their traumas, please guide them to this video. And of course, if you need to work on your traumas, seek professional help. Like me, I do trauma counseling as well. And if you have liked this video, please leave a like, comment and share with anyone who might need it. And until next time, remember that mental health is for everyone.